Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the Celtic Down Under's The Weekend Review on a Monday night, Western Australia edition. Full house again this week. I've joined myself, Sean, is joined by Anthony, Paul and Tommy. I was just discussing with you guys off air how I'd had a bit of a rough Sunday after playing 2 straight games of 11-a-sides. And then following it up with some start of the season libations. So feeling a bit rough today and that after that sunshine as well. And if I got the referee's name, I'd give him a shout out and say, get it up you for the descent that he booked me for. That guy was a tosser. Anthony, how's your weekend?
I've been battling a little bit of a cold this week. I had too much celebrating at the Celtic club last week, apparently.
COVID, mate.
I thought, no, I've been rat testing. I've had a swab up my nose every day this week. So not COVID, just a cold. But yeah, I've been laying relatively low.
Tommy, how was your weekend?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. We only played the one game yesterday. I'm not as mental as you, obviously, at this age. I'm a little bit older than you, but we had our first game of the season away up at Ballajura, 1-4-0 in a crappy pitch and a home ref. And yeah, quite enjoyable. Had a few beers last night as well. Watched the Celtic game, good performance. Pretty good weekend.
And Paul, we managed to get 22 players available out of a squad of 37. So when are you coming down to sign on?
I'm carrying a hammy strain at the minute, so I'm not.
My other 15 players that were out yesterday.
I'm still on the fence
right
about whether I'm going to play for anyone this season, but we'll see. My weekend was pretty good. I was at a beer festival on Saturday night. Traipsed all the way down to King Road Brewing, but it was.
Mate, they sponsor our club.
Yeah, it was worth the journey. So it was a bit of a hop harvest festival. 12 different beers on. Apparently had too many because getting in it after 1 o'clock is apparently frowned upon when you're less than 4 weeks married. So I was in the doghouse for a chunk of Sunday. So there was no beers on Sunday. So I was sober for the match, so I didn't have to watch it back or do too much extra research this week, which was good.
What did you have to do to make up for it on Sunday night?
Well, she's been recuperating after surgery as well, so just generally running around doing as much as I could to make up for it, and yeah, pretending I didn't have a hangover, which is the main chore. Luckily, I don't suffer with them too much, but as I get older, it seems to be sneaking up on me.
Oh, man, rough. But yeah, just start as you mean to go on, marriage is for life. Anyone that wants to join in the comments, please give us a shout. I'm sure people will filter in gradually once Axon finishes. But if anyone's like to join in early on, give us a shout. The weekend, for the 17th or 18th time this season, Sevco played ahead of us on the Saturday and we played on the Sunday. So we had Kilmarnock on the Sunday in our showcase game for television on the resplendent, glorious pitch down in Ayrshire with half an empty stadium. Really selling the Scottish game down there. We went into the game. Kilmarnock had 1 win in 8 going into it. Not an away win to their name all season. And they have won 47% of their home games before Sunday. So there was some home form that they could maybe cling to. The kind of surprise for Celtic was there was a couple of players not in the squad that had not been mentioned at the Friday presser. There was no sign of Carter Vickers or Jota at all. And again, this hadn't been mentioned. Moy was dropped to the bench after his stinking performance last week. And there was a possibility of a Ralston comeback from injury as he was on the bench as well. Paul, what did you make of the lineup? What was your thoughts before the game?
Yeah, look, I wasn't completely surprised to see a few changes. Obviously, we've growing the gap. So Kelly have been on really too poor form, as you've mentioned. That said, I think there's only 3 teams that had defeated them there, albeit the only 47% of wins. I think only the Huns and I think Livy had won there other than ourselves. So yeah, not really a big surprise to see some changes. Obviously a little bit surprised to see CCV and Jota missing, as you mentioned. But given the stage in the season we're at, I don't think it's worth taking any risks on that plastic pitch. So nice to see some other guys get an opportunity. Some did better with that opportunity than others. I think some people will feel like they've maybe missed a trick, missed an opportunity. But yeah, generally pretty happy with the team. Wasn't too concerned ahead of the match, and the first half hour pretty much vindicated that. So yeah, impressive start. A few people put their hand up for, if not a start, then certainly being not really concerned if they have to slot in. So yeah, I was pleased to see some changes, albeit they're possibly enforced or from a sensible point of view, just protecting players. But as we said, I think the other week, the biggest game of the season from here is that semi-final. So important that we've got as fit a squad as possible going into that match.
The story before the game was that Jota hadn't trained on the Thursday or the Friday, so I don't think his was sparing him from the plastic pitch. I think he's just injured in some way. No idea what, since it's been picked up at training. Carter Vickers has obviously been carrying an injury for a while. He was out of the USA squad. The rumours going around is that he's due to get some surgery. That will see him out for a few months, and we'll kind of come back to that later when we talk about Kobayashi and Starfelt. On the game itself, we had our usual surfeit of possession. We actually had more than normal. Our average possession is about 73% in a game. Obviously, we were down at 55% last week when we played Sevco, but we're back up to 77% yesterday. We had 632 passes to 121 for Kilmarnock, which again is roughly the same as Starfelt completes in any given game. Again, not too different from any other team in the SPFL below second place. What was a bit of a surprise was that our 16 shots were matched by 14 from Kelly. Now, somebody's going to have to pull me up in that one and tell me if that's just a statistical anomaly or if they were actually being threatening, because I don't really have too much memory of them providing. I remember one save, and apart from that, I can't think of much else. But the XG came out at 1.79 to 1.48, marginally in our favour. Again, another surprising stat. So apart from that one really, I don't know if you want to call it world class, but certainly point blank save from Joe Hart, where Kelly really in it? Are the stats lying? What was the overall feeling of the game, Tommy, in light of those stats? What's your eyeball take of it?
Oh, for me, the stats just completely don't tell the story of the game, to be honest. I thought we started, first half hour was probably the best we've played in a long time, probably several months. I thought we looked really fluid, really crisp. Our passing, if you compare it to last week when we were giving away the 5 and 10 yard passes, our passing was sharp. There was people moving on and off the ball. We're creating chances. It could have been 5 or 6 before half an hour. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that you see a manager making 2 substitutions on the half hour mark to try and shore things up. And then they continue to try and waste time throughout the game. So for me, yeah, the stats are a bit of an anomaly. And we probably took a foot off the pedal a little bit in the second half, but the first half, I mean, we just blew them away. It was like the kind of Celtic performance that we've got used to seeing under Ange. And yeah, the stats definitely don't tell the story there. I mean, we could have been streets ahead of them, in my view.
Anthony, do you think if Derek McInnes had started with that team that he changed to after 30 minutes, that Kilmarnock would have won the game? Because technically they did. From 30 minutes on, they won that game after they made those changes.
He didn't get his tactics right from the start of the game. That much is for certain. They started with 2 up front, which was surprising because not many teams start with 2 up front against Celtic, home or away. So I mean, one hand you sort of say, well, fair play for having a go, but they got totally overrun the midfield, and we just absolutely slaughtered them. The movement between Iwata, McGregor, and O'Reilly, they just couldn't match it. They just didn't. Did not have a clue as to what was going on. And before they knew it, they were 4-0 down. Kilgore misses a penalty, so it could have been 5. And you're just thinking, how many is it going to be? It's just trying to be a cricket store. Making substitutions on the half-hour mark. He dragged a big George up front, and then who's the other guy? He dragged the guy who basically set up 2 of our goals.
Fraser
Murray. Yeah. I mean, that back pass obviously set up Kilgore for the first goal, and Kilgore still had a lot to do after that, but I mean, far out. I mean, it was just bad all round. and then his clearance for the third goal, I think it was O'Reilly's second goal.
Yeah, fourth,
again,
I think, yeah.
I don't know what he was trying to do there. So I mean, I can understand why he got hooked, but it was just he needs to spend less time in the suntan bed and more time out in the training field, I think, because it was pretty dire. But no, to answer your question, Sean, no. Bringing on Alan Power and all that, I mean, that would just have maybe made it a bit more respectable for longer, but there was only one team that was winning that game. And I have to say, that first half from Celtic was probably the best 45 minutes of football on plastic I've ever seen, ever. Like, the crispness of the passing, the technique, we look like we play on it every week compared to them who look slow and sluggish and really like how we usually look like Bambi on ice, sort of skating around. We made them look like that in that first half. And that was a real great performance, and probably one that we've been looking for as fans for a little while now, because Celtic have sort of just been doing enough, but that was actually a bit of a marker. And, obviously we'll talk about the second half, but it's probably that was the biggest anticlimax since the last season of Game of Thrones, that second half. But the first half was amazing. So I was a bit spent by half time, but yeah, like I said, so.
It's funny you say that about the best performance on plastic, because I felt the same way last season when we went 3-0 up on Livy. I don't remember if the game finished 3-0 or 3-1, but I felt that at the time that was our best performance on plastic. And then I don't agree with you in a sense, because I'd remembered that when we won at Rugby Park earlier this season, I actually thought we'd played a bit better that day. The game was ultimately 5-0, but I get what you're saying. Particularly in the first half hour, our football was very fluid. So certainly maybe not as an overall complete performance. Might have been better earlier in the season, but certainly that first 30 minutes, you're right, it was probably the most fluid we have been on one of those pitches. Paul, do you reckon it was down to the quality of Kilmarnock, or was our midfield three just too dynamic? What was going on there?
Definitely there's a bit of both in there. We came out the gate really sharp, and the midfield three worked really well together. And AJ and Greg Taylor were both inverting early on, so they were overloading in there massively. So we had a huge advantage in there. But Killie were dreadful in that first 20 minutes, half an hour. You watch the goals back today. I noticed at the time, but obviously do a quick highlight what rewatch today. There's absolutely zero pressure on anyone in our team as we approach the final third. Players are allowed to pick passes at will. There's no pressure on the ball. Like if you look at Kyogo's first, he races clear and he's got a head start, but then the guy basically catches up to him. And then he turns him and he needs a ticket to get back in. But even once he's turned around, he's still got time to take a touch and pick his spot. And there's still no pressure on the ball. Like they just were lackadaisical on that stuff. Same on AJ runs off for the second goal and there's not enough pressure on the cross. The guy's with him. He just doesn't put enough pressure on that aggressive, defensive positioning. Same Greg Taylor for the third. He's able to, stroll into midfield and pick a pass to O'Reilly and he strokes it in the bottom corner. It's just pretty much every goal. And then, to Anthony's point, some of the defending, the comical header up in the air, first of all, and then a sclaff back up in the air and eventually gets what it deserves. Their defending was appalling. The pressure was really poor. They weren't aggressive enough. We could have been any score by half time. And obviously we took our foot off the gas and rotated the squad second half. And, as a fan, you're a little bit frustrated that the performance isn't as good. But if you take off that hat that's got a desire to see as many goals as possible, we were pretty professional and, take the big players off, rest them, keep them fit. Job's already done. No point risking players or getting injury. Get some minutes into players that are on the fringe of the squad. So all in all, we were excellent, but they were absolutely appalling in that first half an hour.
And they're paying for it with their league position. They're now 1 point off the bottom with a vastly
they've got the worst goal difference. They had the worst goal difference in the league, I think, before that, and obviously that didn't make it any better.
And that's even with the -9 handicap that Dundee United got when they played us. They're still still worse off than Dundee United by a distance.
Well, I think if if Kyogo scores that penalty, potentially they're staring down the barrel of 7 or 8 or 9. But yeah, it didn't quite happen in the end, but it was looking like it for a while.
The funniest thing about that penalty was before we'd even taken the penalty, the Kilmarnock fans were filtering out. They were on TV. Not that there was many of them there, but there was a few filtering out. Hardly surprising given how their season's going and how much there was just certainty they were going to get absolutely cuffed. But I don't really want to move on from the midfield yet. I want to focus on that for a little bit more. Tommy, I want you to tell me if I'm off the mark here, on the mark. What to me it looked like was that rather than playing Callum McGregor in a number 6 line moving across, it looked like what we were doing instead was we had Iwata and Callum McGregor without coming across, instead playing up and down, dropping into that number 6 to get the ball and move up. So instead of McGregor going side to side, it was Iwata and McGregor going forwards and back, with O'Reilly kind of staying as more of a number 10 linchpin in the centre there. Is that how you saw it? How did that work? There was a lot of praise being coming out for Iwata. Do you think this is a system we're looking at to use for Europe next year? What do you think?
Look, I don't disagree with you at all. I haven't had a chance to watch back the first half and actually have a look at the movement, but definitely I watched back the second half just to try and see what we've done maybe differently in the second half just earlier. And it looked to me when I was looking at the midfield that exactly that's what was happening. McGregor and Iwata were sort of taking turns and going up and down, but Iwata was probably more forward advanced and he was making more runs forward. He was definitely far more threatening in an attacking sense than I've seen him previously. But for me, it was just the interchangeability of them, that they were just shifting positions, like they take turns, go forward, go back. And it just worked, and particularly in the first half, just worked really well. And I thought Matt O'Reilly was absolutely outstanding. It's sort of been building over the last couple of weeks. You could just tell he's sort of coming back to form, and he was influential in the first half. I mean, took great finishes, calm, composed, give him half a yard, and the ball's in the net. And he even played in Haksabanovic to set up Johnson. But the midfield three, it was a different look, but it worked really well. And I mean, that's the thing you want to look for in a football team, is you want to have flexibility, you want to have options. You don't want to be stuck to the one rigid system, because we have been pretty reliant on McGregor in that number 6 role, him coming to get the ball and then setting up attacks, turning, taking it in difficult positions. So giving us that flexibility could be good. And I mean, Iwata, that was his best game yesterday for me. I thought he was tremendous.
Yeah, I thought the three of them were great, particularly not just in terms of their movement and like physicality, just like their passing was just so crisp, but their first touch was incredible. Like in the first half in particular, it was like just a game of keep ball. It was like, I don't know, it was kind of like watching some Barcelona players do a warm up. Like that was the kind of level of opposition they were getting from Kilmarnock at times.
Just quickly, sorry to interrupt, but you can't underplay the difficulty of actually doing that on one of those plastic pitches, because playing on that kind of surface is just so different. I mean, we've probably all played on them here at different levels, here over in Australia. There's one up the road in Ellenbrook, but sometimes you don't know how the ball's going to bounce, you don't know how the ball's going to carry, those sort of things. So to do it on that pitch was top class in my opinion.
So Mickey McInnes mentioned in the comments, did anyone else hear Kelly had narrowed the pitch? I think this is an old story that gets regurgitated. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they narrowed it some years ago. And every time a Celtic game comes around, that picture of them changing the size of it gets resurfaced on social media. Is anyone?
I know they definitely.
So I was just going to say, it certainly looked like there was a big setback from the front, but I can't remember what. You're probably right. I think we'd have had more about it in the immediate aftermath if it was absolutely brand new. But yeah, it certainly looked like it was set back a fair bit from the TV camera. Yeah,
Tommy, did you notice?
Yeah, I was just going to say that they've definitely done that in the past. I think it might have been when Brendan Rodgers was the manager, when we had the Invincible season. I'm pretty sure that they pulled it in. It was quite noticeable because you could still see the lines. So I haven't heard. It's the first I've heard anything about it being done yesterday. But obviously, didn't make any difference, did it?
It was more. I thought. Yeah, I knew they'd done it in the past, but I didn't think they were doing it and redoing it over and over again. I thought it was just something that had happened and stayed that way. I'm not 100% on that, so not totally up to date on that one, Mickey. But hopefully, I think there would have been more of a deal about it if they had. I'm not moving on from the midfield yet, Anthony. I want to ask yourself: Do you think so? Obviously, we had the cup final where Callum McGregor in the League Cup final just had the freedom of that midfield, with the formation that Sevco had set up. And then we played them last week at Celtic Park, and they then have changed. Sevco have actually changed their out of possession formation to nullify Callum McGregor. Do you think that this changing formation yesterday with this new midfield dynamic, do you think that's with the semi-final in mind? Do you think this is the same middle three and the same system that we're going to see in the semi-final in 2 weeks?
Possibly. I mean, Iwata's definitely coming onto a game. Him and McGregor, their understanding was exceptional. I think the passing between the lines in that first half was very fluid, but in saying that, I think it was easy because the Killie players were that far off our respective forward players that the pass was fairly obvious, and they were still hitting it and zipping it in, but not under as much pressure as they maybe had been in the previous week against Sevco. Paul's referenced this double pivot and having Iwata and McGregor playing playing as 2 6s or as an axis, so one dropping in and one pushing up. And this might be the next evolution of Ange ball, particularly in Europe, particularly when we're playing stodgy, teams that maybe are trying to play presses, so that if they're going after McGregor, that's fine. Well, Iwata just comes in and takes the ball instead. And then the overload comes from your 2 fullbacks, because that was the other thing that AJ and Greg Taylor were also providing those extra numbers in the midfield, and just they only had 2 in there, and they just got absolutely played off the park. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, I've probably been a bit critical of O'Reilly in the last, since we started, broadcasting, and I think he's hopefully turned a corner now, and he's back into some really healthy form. I mean, obviously he added a couple of goals yesterday, but if he's back to his best, then that's great. And over a season, that's realistically that's what's going to happen, because Moy was cruising, was playing really well, picked up a little bit of an injury, hasn't quite hit the heights since he's come back, and even when he came on yesterday, he didn't really do too much, didn't really sort of get involved and really grab the end of the scruff of it, which is hard when you're 4-1 up. I get it, but he needs to be fight. If he wants to start again, he's going to have to fight for that jersey. And O'Reilly put a performance in yesterday that would be definitely worthy of him holding on to it for the next time.
Well, that's it. Paul, is there anyone that Moy comes in for, or is he just now fourth choice after? And that's the kind of the level we're at now, that you can have 1.5 bad games and you're canned from the team. I remember Hatate had a bad game at St Johnstone, and he was out for Turnbull the next week because Turnbull had been coming off the bench and scoring. But then the very next week, Turnbull comes on, plays an hour, has a stinker. Hatate comes off the bench, scores 2 goals, and he's back in the team. Is that just where we're at now, that Moy just has to bide his time until he gets his chance again?
I think he probably does, based on the last 2 performances. He obviously, we spoke about it in detail. He had a shocker of a first half, and he had a half decent comeback for the 10 minutes afterwards. But then could have already been hooked, and then I think it was the right decision to take him off then. And look, he didn't look great when he came on yesterday. Obviously, wasn't as bad. It would make it pretty hard to be as bad as he was the week before. But I know that pitch and that surface isn't great, but his footing. He seemed to lose his footing way more than most other players in the match. And yeah, he just didn't look up to speed. And look, maybe if you remember when he first got into the team, it took him a number of games or parts of games to get some form and the pace of the game and all of that. And then he was sort of flying going into the World Cup, or just starting to look good at going into the World Cup, and he came off the back of the World Cup, and he'd been flying ever since. So it's maybe just a player that takes a bit longer to get back up to speed after a bit of time out. So that's one potential theory. But yeah, I think he's probably gonna struggle to be a first pick next week, you would think. And if he isn't a first pick next week, he's probably not a first pick for the semi-final either. But I'd just like to go back to the midfield. I know we're still in the midfield, but the original 3, to the other guys' points. I don't know if anyone else has seen the post-match interview with Matt O'Reilly on Celtic TV, but it was quite enlightening. He basically was asked about he was asked about his own performance, but he's also asked about Iwata and how the three of them work together. And he actually said he enjoyed it because it was so fluid. And I actually spotted him dropping quite deep at points. Like, he obviously played at 6 when McGregor was injured. There was a couple of points in that first half. He was the deepest line midfielder. So whilst he was more often in that 10 kind of zone, he was sometimes the furthest back midfielder and pinging longer passes through the lines. So it sounded like they had a bit of freedom as a 3 to sort of work smart in terms of if the other 2 have gone, then somebody drops. And I thought it was pretty interesting that, especially when we've talked about O'Reilly when he hasn't been playing as well, and we talked about his best form being when he was sitting as a 6. And I think we've also said that we potentially, some of us see that as maybe his best position longer term. To have the 3 of them to be able to be that fluid, his actual words were, they couldn't live with us with our movement and our fluidity. And that is definitely the case. And look, Iwata, he had a tremendous game. Not only was his passing great, but his willingness to make forward runs was great. And again, much like Kyogo, he made some great runs and we didn't see it, or we didn't spot that run, or we didn't make that pass. But yeah, pretty exciting to see how he can develop. And again, in the same interview, O'Reilly says he's an absolute tank. Like, he just beasts it in the gym. His arms are as wide as some people's legs. He's always doing upper body work, and I think that came through. His strength and composure was really good in the midfield. Yes, it's Killy, and they didn't put us under a massive amount of pressure. But on the surface, to get 90 minutes under his belt, he was unlucky not to cap his performance with a goal, with that really good strike from outside the box that just whistled past the post second half. The midfield 3 were the midfield 3 that started. I think it'd be hard to shift them for the next game, and if they all do well, then they put their hand up for a start in the semi. The only assumption is if
Hatate, though.
Well, look, if Hatate's fit, if Hatate's fit for the next game to be on the bench, obviously he wasn't risked in this game. If he's got a full week's training and he's fit to be on the bench, I think he starts on the bench. Then he probably gets the 30 minutes, and it depends what he does with that, you would say. And then, but for me, on current form, he's the only one I would say could potentially displace one of these 3. And it's probably a toss-up between Iwata and O'Reilly as to which one steps out, because obviously Cal's going to play.
Imagine that. We're going into a cup semi-final and we've got a potential player of the year in Rio Hatate coming off the bench to run at them in the second half at Hampden. That is good. It's interesting, Paul, there you mentioned Iwata and the word strong, because when I was watching him yesterday and I was like, right, what is it? Like, we can all tell he's a good player because we all instinctively understand what a good football player does, but I was like, right, what is it precisely? And the first word I wrote down was strong, and I wrote down dynamic, precise, and I was trying to think of who does he remind me of? He's not quite the same as Callum McGregor, who's a bit more energetic. And it kind of reminds me of Joe Ledley a bit, and I was just thinking to myself that Joe Ledley, apart from the fact he's not much of a goal threat, and he gets forward in the second half and puts one 6 inches by the post. I was like, all right, okay, maybe he is a bit of a Joe Ledley. I think Callum McGregor, would you blame Callum McGregor for the goal when he got caught in possession? Is that harsh?
Oh, look, he's allowed one mistake, as Ange said after the game. How many mistakes does Callum McGregor make? And he probably wasn't expecting it, to be fair. It was a fair barge, and the guy got away with it. It was a fair challenge, but it was pretty physical. It's not many times you see Callum get knocked off the ball. He's not a big guy. He's probably pretty small in terms of weight and height. So you'd expect him to get knocked off the ball more than he actually does. So look, for me, it's a one-off. He was actually pretty sore after it. If you saw it in the replay, I think he was actually down. He was pretty sore after it. So, but that's just the way we play, and sometimes that's going to happen. But for me, how can you blame a guy that gives so much to the team week in, week out in terms of taking responsibility? As I said earlier, he's always the one that's there taking the ball in the difficult spots, those sort of things. If that happens once every couple of years, we're not going to argue about it. And if you're going to do it, time to do it is when you're 4-0 up.
Yeah, and he handed over the captain's armband to Joe Hart when he went off. So that was interesting as well. But I think normally the person that gets after Callum McGregor's Carter Vickers, and obviously he wasn't in the squad either. So the rumour is he's due to get an operation. And again, rumour out for up to 4 months at that point. So it could be that he could play the cup semi-final, and that could be him until September-ish, if that's true. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just a rumor that's going around. So that
in his post press conference, he said, "We just did, pitch isn't conducive for him. He's back next week." So,
but Ange also didn't mention anything about it on Friday. So
true.
don't take that as any kind of fact. That's just him manipulating the media in his way. But that's the rumors anyway. And look, he was out of the USA squad for a reason. So there's something there. So whether this is all true or conjecture or whatever, blah blah blah. The question I want to raise, Anthony, is what did you make of what could potentially be our centre back pairing for quite a few of the foreseeable games in the next few months of UK Kobayashi and Carl Starfelt. So Starfelt restored to his natural right hand side, and Kobayashi coming in to allegedly or potentially provides good balance on the left. What did you make of it?
I thought it looked pretty good. Starfelt looks a different player when he's receiving the ball on his right foot. Like, he just looks more comfortable. And I mean, apart from getting nutmegged in the first 5 minutes of the game, he didn't really put a foot wrong. Aside from that, Yuki set up we'll try and what goal it is now, but he passed it to Greg Taylor, I think, and then Greg Taylor passed it on. So there's definitely one where he was the initial pass forward that was the chain and the link to score the goal. But no, I thought it looked pretty natural. It looked pretty comfortable. It looked like they'd been playing together. The way I look at it is, right, the Huns have got Ben Davies and John Suter at the moment. And that looks like a pairing that haven't even kicked the ball, let alone kicked the ball together as a centre-half pairing. And compare that to those two yesterday. They look like they've been playing together for, the whole season sort of thing. So I just, I think the fact that we've got those three, Starfelt can shuffle across left or right. You've got Yuki, and you also got CCV. I mean, that's a pretty handy triumvirate of central defenders. And then obviously you've got Stephen Welsh as backup if you need to, bring on another centre half. But I think we're, at the moment our stocks there are good. I think the challenge will be at the end of the season holding on to both Starfelt and CCV for another season because. I think we commented on last week, we never got to see Starfelt and CCV in the Champions League. And if he is carrying a long-term injury and this is like he plays the semi-final of the Cup and then he goes and has surgery, he's got time to recover because we're not going to need to play European qualifiers. There's no World Cup this year. He'll have time to recuperate and rest. So if that's what it takes, so be it. But I'd be more than happy with Starfelt and Yuki for the rest of the season,
including the Hampden semi-final.
Well, if it came to that, well, absolutely, yeah, not a problem. But I think if it's one of these things where they're just managing CCV, I think that is the logical last game that he plays, and then he goes and has surgery. Because realistically, that's effectively our last big game this season. Realistically.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about as well. And the comments here, we've got Lost in BKK saying Kobayashi reminded me of Paul Elliott, just strolled around as if he was taking a Sunday walk in the park. That was kind of my observation too, and it was a bit of not a concern so much as an area for development, because I seem to remember Carl Starfelt was kind of the same when he first started. If you think back to the cup final where we beat Hibs 2-1, and Starfelt... maybe I'm thinking of a different game, but there was one where Starfelt gets absolutely caught out under the ball, and I'm sure it was against Hibs. And he kind of changed his game after that and became a lot more aggressive and front foot. And that's why, the chat is often that it's a hard position to play in our team because you have to be aggressive. And I'm not sure Kobayashi's playing that aggressively yet. Like when Kilmarnock score, he's on the line, try to clear it. And that's how often do you see our defenders in that position? Like normally you expect him to be in the middle there. So I think there's still a bit of development to go for Kobayashi, but there's clearly a footballer there and clearly someone that can defend. So hopefully he gets into the system well enough. The other two defenders both got registered an assist each. Could have been 2 assists for Taylor if Kyogo scores that penalty. For me, Taylor always looks, or going into the game, I'm thinking Taylor always turns up on this pitch. He's played at Rugby Park for years. And for Alistair Johnson, I think he's been watching back some old Celtic Rangers game because he seemed to have exacted some revenge on behalf of Moritz Bauer when he took out Jordan Jones for no reason that I can think of. Paul, what did you make of our two fullbacks, and particularly that yellow card at the end? Was it gratuitous? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it, but it was sort of out of sorts. He usually puts his aggression in with a bit of the ball, and he just kind of hammered them. To be honest,
usually more subtle, right?
It's usually a bit more subtle. There's a bit of aggression, but there's a bit of the ball if he's smashing somebody. But no, not really at all. So you kind of think that it was intentional. I thought they both had a great game again. Taylor was really, really good. Like he was just picking up great positions, particularly first half. The only wobble he probably had in the whole match is he's probably not aggressive enough with his winger for that point blank save that Joe Hart gets, because he allows his winger to get away from him, putting a pretty good cross, and then obviously Hart makes a brilliant save, just making himself big and gets that luck that the effort deserved. But going forward, particularly first half, he was always available. Kelly didn't have an answer to the positions he was taking up in his overall movement. And between him, O'Reilly, Maeda, and Kyogo, there was just so much interplay and movement. A lot of what we did great in the first half came down that inside left channel and outside left channel. Maeda was a pest all day long as well. And the fullback, I think, was on loan from Rangers, Mayo. I think he's on a kid on loan from them. He got a torrid time first half, and he'd probably be good for his development longer term, but he got ripped a new one most of that first half. And AJ just kind of picked up where he left off. He was full of energy, full of running, brilliant burst and cross. Even if, like I say, I didn't think there was enough pressure put on him for the cross, but he swings a great cross in. And again, I think the defenders in the box weren't aggressive enough either. Amira just pops up and puts a lovely placed header back across the keeper and across the defence, and it drops in nicely. And then AJ sums up just the overall, dynamism and energy by, he's the one charging into the box and pretty much pushing Ben Summers out of the way for an attempted goal in injury time to try and get another one and put the icing on the cake. And to be honest, having got there, he should probably do better and he should probably hit the target. But it just kind of sums up his desire to keep going and to make a difference in the team. And so they both had a cracking performance, and they're both starting to become players that we put in that bracket with Carl and CCV, where they never drop below an 8, and I think Greg Taylor's probably arguably already there, and AJ's fast coming up as well.
Yeah, and he was claiming that the goalkeeper got a touch in that one, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he was saying. Tommy, I'd like for you to talk about the two strikers. So we had Kyogo played the first half, then he comes off, probably just, again, game's done, so but he has obviously the chance to score he scored his 29th goal of the season after 7 minutes, and I thought he just made it look really simple. And I don't know if that, again, down to the opposition we've mentioned repeatedly. First time he's taken a penalty for us, hits the post. Same post that Giakoumakis hits. I don't know what it is with our strikers, and I think it's the same post that Rio Tati hit in Australia as well. They seem to be trained to aim for that post, and more often than not, they seem to be hitting it, unfortunately. So hopefully Jota and Moy are back on duty soon. But another thing that kind of summed up his performance was the tracking back to win a slide tackle when it was 3-0 all the way back in the Celtic box. So there was a lot there from Kyogo. Then at half-time, O comes on, and he only really has one clear chance, and Derek McInnes accuses him of excessive or violent conduct, or whatever it is, excessive force, whatever you want to call it. Do you think he came on at halftime because Klinsmann was there? Do you think his performance was affected by his national team manager flying all the way to Scotland to watch him? What did you make of those two, Kyogo and his replacement O?
All right, we'll start with O first, because that's probably a little bit quicker. But I thought O coming on at halftime was good. I mean, we're 4-1 up. We're not really searching for goals. He needed a bit of a run out, give him some more time. Some of these guys that haven't played much, it's difficult to get up to speed. And I say this probably most weeks, I'm like a broken record, but when you're playing 10, 15 minutes, it's hard to get a bit of a rhythm. So good to get him into the game. The unfortunate thing for O was that For me, at the start of the second half, the referee kept on breaking up the play. Every time we would be going forward, there'd be some soft fouls, and it really didn't allow us to get a bit of a flow. And to be honest, we'd probably taken a foot off the pedal a little bit as well. We weren't quite as fluid and moving the ball as quickly. So he didn't really have too many opportunities to get into the game. With regards to the Derek McInnes, well, I mean, what can you say about that? That's just nonsense. If you look at what he's doing, all he's got is eyes for the ball. It's similar to what the Hibs guy done against CCV a few weeks ago when we thought he was unlucky to get a yellow card. So, I mean, for me, it's no more than a yellow card. That's the match you're going to get for that. So Derek McInnes is just trying to do the usual sort of Sevco-leaning manager, Robbie Nielsen style deflection. That's all he's trying to do there, because that doesn't make sense. But he was unlucky towards the end. I think we had an absolutely unbelievable move that would have been goal of the season if he could have turned it in. I think we started on left-hand side with Haksabanovic, came back to Taylor, Kobayashi, Hart, Starfelt, down to Iwata, Johnson, back into Iwata, down the line to young Vata, who put in a fantastic cross. And that was probably his main chance of the game, and he wasn't that far away. So I just think it was difficult for him in the second half. But Kyogo, I mean, what can you say about the guy? I mean, we are so fortunate to have him. So fortunate. Like, he is, for me, and I said it last week, I think the best striker we've had since Larson. And it's not only his goals and his touch, it's his work rate, which you mentioned before, Sean, running back the length of the pitch when we're 2 or 3 up to chase the attacker down, win the ball. Even his goal, if you watch his goal, he's reading the pass. But it's similar to what he done last week when Jota scored the third. He's actually thinking, okay, well, what's happening here? He's thinking ahead of the game. He's closing the guy down, and the guys get no chance. And then the touch to clip it around him, the composure, the awareness. I mean, he's just a fantastic footballer. And as I said, we're very lucky to have him. If he was a good penalty taker, he'd probably have at least 34, 35 goals this year.
Yeah, and if he hadn't been injured last year as well. You mentioned the referee's performance there. I also thought it was not the greatest. I mean, would you want him in charge of the semi-final? Probably not. But John Francis in the comments say that Dickinson gave a few non-fouls to Kilmarnock. I felt like that myself. That I felt like he was giving some sympathy decisions in their favour. 1 minute of injury time in the first half when there was 4 goals, a penalty, and 2 subs. I mean, come on, man. It wasn't. But what I don't want to move on from Derek McInnes and his comments around O just yet. I want you to come in and comment on this, Anthony, and if you want to say anything, Paul, jump in as well. So, was it pure deflection? Or is McInnes losing his mind? Does he have any justification for like the full 90-second rant or whatever, where he was bringing up a innocuous, moderate high foot that wasn't dangerous, in my opinion, and probably most fair-minded people's opinions wasn't dangerous. What was he just deflecting from the fact that he's got it so badly wrong with his own selection, as Mahesh has said in the comments, that and he's just trying to purely deflect from himself by trying to focus on a Celtic incident, that a refereeing incident. What's going on? Is he losing the plot?
When does he not lose the plot when he's playing Celtic? I mean, the guy is just an absolute fud, and he's just done it again. Like, he could talk about the second half and say they managed to draw the second half and they probably created the best chance of the second half, but no, he tries to make a controversial, like, oh, that should have been a red card. So what? You're 4-1 down. What difference would it make anyway if it was sent off? And it was never a sending off anyway. Yellow card at the absolute most. And I agree, the referee gave some absolute soft free kicks in the second half. It was just, every time we went near one of their players, they just fell over and they got a free kick. And Callum McGregor got shoulder barged off the ball for their goal in the first half. And I don't think that was a free kick either. But if you some of the free kicks in the second half that they were getting, you'd say that was definitely a free kick in the first half. So no consistency, bit of damage limitation, feeling sorry for them, whatever you want to call it. But Derek McInnes has got the world's biggest inferiority complex when he plays Celtic. He's never beaten us. He couldn't beat us with Aberdeen, and he's not beaten us with Kelly either. And yet he could have another 20 goes at it, and he still won't do it either. And Callum Davison got the sack on the weekend. We'll touch on that a bit later. Robbie Nielsen got the sack last week. We never touched on that. I tell you what, surely he's got to be next in line for getting the arse if they continue on their current streak, because who would sit and watch that? Obviously not the fans, because they were walking out after 30 minutes. So yeah, no, I think his head's just a bit on a pike. It's not far away anyway. And yeah, good riddance.
Yeah, and yeah, as you said, he is probably next in the hot seat. I think because, and we can kind of link these points together here, I think teams are kind of looking at Aberdeen and Motherwell and seeing the kind of success that they've had in changing manager at a crucial point in the season. And also there's quite a lot going on right now, 32 games into the season. We're getting to the business end, as they proverbially call it. And, if you feel that you can get a bounce from a change of one personnel rather than 5 or 6 new players outside of a transfer window, then it feels like the transfer window almost forces these things. It feels like back in the day, like you'd get a team just sign a player. Do you know what I mean? Like they go and sign a big name to try and patch up something that's fallen apart, like Tore André Flo or whatever. We just got humped 6-2 off Celtic. We could sack the manager. We could go and spend 12 million on Tore André Flo, that sort of thing. And nowadays it's like, well, there's a transfer window. The only change we can make outside that is staffing. So Callum Davidson, who is St Johnstone's most successful ever manager, paid for it with his job. And again, I think a lot of it is down to what Aberdeen are doing right now and what Motherwell are doing right now. Paul, have you been tracking what's been going on with Aberdeen and Hearts in this kind of third, fourth battle?
Yeah, well, I've talked a wee bit. That's kind of my neck of the woods. So there's always a few mates that are Dons fans and come up on my social media feed. So definitely been keeping one eye on it. And obviously with Robson being an ex-Celtic man, it's an interesting one. A peer of mine, actually, I played football against him as a school kid. He was much better than me. It won't surprise you to hear. But yeah, we digress. Look, the Dons are on a great run. I think the interesting thing is some of those wins have been pretty marginal. They haven't necessarily been amazing in those games, but they've managed to put a run together. What are they now? Like 6 wins in a row. They're up 5 points clear of Hearts. Look, it's theirs to lose. That third place is definitely theirs to lose. The Jambos are obviously hoping for a dead cat bounce. Are they going to get it? Wouldn't have thought so. Naismith didn't seem the most inspiring in his first couple of interviews, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Is that going to be as good an appointment as Frankie Lampard? We'll wait and see. But
did you just
in
compare
general,
Stephen Naismith to Frank Lampard? Come on, Paul.
Well, in terms of, I don't think he's going to be a great manager, is he? So we'll see. Lampard's had an absolute mare since he went to Chelsea, and it's a bit of a poison chance. Like I get your point, and I get why clubs think, if we change the manager, that might be the solution. But I think for every one that you get right, and there's a couple we've talked about getting right. Look at the state of United. Like they're partly in the mess they're in because they didn't show a bit of loyalty and balance with managers, and they've chopped, what are they on their 3rd or 4th manager of the season? And look, Goodwin might get him out of it. He's had a couple of good results. But I think that there's a bigger issue here at play, and it's probably not the time to discuss it, but the way our league is set up means that clubs make knee-jerk reactions because dropping out of the league is it can't begin to be a possibility because you can't continue to probably be professional if you drop out of the league based on what it would do to your budget and the like, especially some of these clubs that can't get people through the door already. So there's just a perpetual merry-go-round of people being concerned about potentially getting relegated. So, they make knee-jerk reactions, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I guess if even a team gets a dead cat bounce for 3 or 4 games at this time of season, they can put a run together that pulls them out of the shit. Or in Aberdeen's case, it's pulling them up to a European place by the looks of it. So there's pros and cons on that, right? So it's pretty exciting. If you're a neutral, it's pretty exciting, but potentially it's if you're a fan, it's pretty stressful, and if you're an owner, probably even worse. So it'll be interesting to see how the last few. Well, we've got one more round before we go into the split, and the split the split in both ends is going to be interesting, but obviously you expect us and the other lot to win the majority of their games. So really it's those few other teams against each other that's going to dictate whether, you can get third, fourth, or the like. So Robson's had impressive results. We spoke a few weeks ago about, if he got them to, got them up to third and held them there, you'd expect him to get the job. And I still think that's probably the case if he does that.
Well, he was manager of the month, so he's certainly on with a shout. Another team you mentioned there, Hibs, they won 1-0, the first derby win since 2019, which is interesting in and of itself because, we all would prefer Hibs to win over Hearts any day, and that kind of dichotomy of Edinburgh derby-wise. Like, we want to see Edinburgh Rangers suffer and Edinburgh Hibernian do well, and it's obviously very relevant in the race for the top six because at the moment you've got St Mirren in 5th place, who are 1 point behind Hearts, but Hearts are safe in the top six just based on goal difference. Nothing else really. They actually could drop out, but it would take like a 12 goal swing or something, so it's not going to actually happen. But going into the round 33 next weekend is the final round of fixtures before the split. So you've got St Mirren on 44 points. 1 point behind our Hibs, 1 point behind Hibs or Livy. So Livy are away to Dundee United, Hibs away to St Johnstone, and St Mirren are home to Kilmarnock. So you would expect St Mirren to get a result there, which kind of makes you think it's down to Livy and Hibs. With Livy away to on-form Dundee United, Hibs away to managerless St Johnstone. I don't know. You watched the Hibs game at the weekend, didn't you, Anthony, or a part of it anyway? Who's going to finish top six? St Mirren, Hibs, Livy. Who's two from those three? What do you make of the derby?
I hope Hibs, because I don't want to play the Tony Macaroni again. So, I'd much rather Livy finish in the bottom six. No, I watched the second half of the Hibs Hearts game, and I thought Hibs were by far the better team. They only creating chances. Nesbitt, great finish for the goal. You just see he enjoyed it when it went in. The left winger for Hibs, name escapes me. Black Laddie, he just absolutely, he was just running Hearts ragged. Like if he could pick out a better cross, they'd have been 2-3 up, no worries. Paul Newell stuck an elbow on one of the Hearts players. Naismith was doing absolutely ballistic in the touchline, and I think it probably should have been a red card, but by that point, it was pretty much done and dusted for Hibs, and they won their first derby since 2019. I think it's been a while. Yep. Been a while since they've won one. St Naismith gets off to a defeat, and Robbie Nielsen, he's definitely wasn't. I wasn't a fan of him either, but I feel he's been stiffed out a wee bit. I mean, I know they've been in free fall, but you kind of think, well, like, why not make a change at the end of the season? Like, I get this whole dead cat bounce thing, like, see if you can get a wee run going. But realistically, how often does that happen? As Paul says, not that often. And that now means that Ange is the third longest serving manager in the SPFL behind Martindale and Malky Mackay. And if that doesn't scream tin pot to you, I mean, he's only been there a season and season and 2/3 himself. And he's the third longest serving manager in the league. I mean, come on. But it's that is what it is. But I just, who'd be a football manager is basically what I'm saying. Who would want that responsibility? Yeah,
and just before we move on to the last topic on that, Tommy, what do you reckon? St Mirren, Hibs, Livy, what do you think?
Look, to be honest, I'm not fussed as long as it's not Livy. I just don't like going to that plastic pitch in that stadium. I think St Mirren, I think we'd have them at home if I'm not mistaken. I think we'll play them twice away. So probably St Mirren because we'll get them at home. Hibs away, sometimes we can sort of struggle away there. So, but anyone aside from Livingston. But just on the manager thing, like, it's a difficult thing at football, and you see it all the time in the English Premier League as well. You see these guys, they get these managers in. Graham Potter at Chelsea, perfect example. Get him in, spend all this money on all these players. It's not working for the first few months. You don't give them time. Sometimes you need to give managers 600
million. They spent 600 million.
I mean, it takes time to meld that and wield that into an effective unit. It takes time to bring those sort of things together. So understand that results are everything in football, but in my opinion, a lot of managers don't get enough time, and it's the same in Scotland as well, and that's evidenced by the turnover. Having said that, get the right manager in, and look what can happen.
Yeah, well, we're saying that, but look at Aberdeen canned their manager, and he's popped up at Dundee United, and the Dundee United fans are on Football Phone-In saying he's the best manager they've had in years, and I'm like, is this like, what's going on here? Like, is it just a case of a new face just gets a reaction out of players? Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like that sometimes. Yeah. Michael Ross in the comments here, Davidson to Hearts. Honestly, like, it makes sense. Like, it does, and it shouldn't. Like, it should not make sense, but it really does. I don't know. I feel sorry for some of these managers, but like we said, it's just the way football is now. So the big story from the weekend out with the men's game was that Celtic Women had a absolutely fantastic result. They beat Glasgow City 4-2 away, and what that means for their season is they're now 5 points behind top place Glasgow City, who haven't lost. That was the first time they've lost a game all season. First time Celtic have actually won at Petershill, which is the home ground of Glasgow City. And 5 points behind, 7 games left, including a reverse fixture against Glasgow City. Anyone want to just comment on how the ladies team are doing this year? I know we've lost our top scorer, and so we're kind of new names are popping up with these goals. Fran Alonso, obviously still seeing out one eye. How's that? It's obviously not affecting him too much, Paul. What do you reckon?
Yeah. So yeah, apparently getting headbutted is only a 6-match ban, but if you say something bad about a referee, that's maybe 8. So that's a bit of a shambles, to be honest, but it's to be expected with the SFA. Look, I watched the highlights back. There's some good goals actually. I think the star is Jacinta, and I think she was involved in 2 assists and potentially a third with a little deflection. So yeah, some good finishing. I only saw the Celtic highlights, so I didn't get to see the 2 Glasgow City goals. Yeah, so I'm not even 100% sure which. I'm not even sure which order the goals came in, because I was like, oh, did we got 4-0? When are these other 2 goals coming? They get missed out. So yeah, I can't talk too much about it. I then tried to find a report on it, and that was nearly impossible. So that's one of the reasons I was nearly late on. I was trying to do a bit of background on that. But yeah, no, look, it seems like the team. Yeah, there's been a few imports. There's been a few younger players joining the squad, and yeah, they seem to be on a bit of a run. Even with that, even that reverse fixture, it's going to need obviously it's going to need Glasgow City to drop more points, which seems unlikely given the stats you've just reeled off. But I think it's just good to see progress. You could actually hear what sounded like either kids or women chanting some Celtic songs in the background on the highlights, which I thought was pretty good. There was developing a little bit of atmosphere, so they're obviously getting players along. And just look at the women's game in general is obviously come on leaps and bounds. I saw related but a different club. I saw an Arsenal related tweet that said I think it was maybe 10 years ago they played Wolfsburg in a semi-final of a European match, and maybe there was less than 2,000 people there, and they've sold 40,000 tickets for the Emirates for the same fixture in the next few weeks. So the development of the women's game has been brilliant. It's great that we are embraced that, and it looks like there's a bit of investment in there. And yeah, there's people getting along to the matches as well. So yeah, the feel good factor across the club, B team, women's game, men's team, all for it. So yeah, hopefully there continues to be good investment, because I guess that's the only way you'll eventually top these leagues and go and win trophies and play at a higher level, is by investing in the best players we can attract. It's just the same as the men's game.
Well, you're saying that we're not likely to catch Glasgow City, which is potentially true, but that win keeps us 1 point ahead of Sevco Women, and if it's the same as last season, then only the top 2 go into Champions League, so it's a crucial win in that sense as well. And the fact that we're playing Glasgow City in the Cup semi next weekend, it could be a psychological blow too. So hopefully, the goals were to a double for Tash Flint, who's not a name that I'm overly familiar with, but then we had goals from Natalie Ross and Caitlin Hayes, who's been doing it pretty consistently. So good on the ladies. You mentioned the B team; they're 2 points off the top of the Lowland League, but I think their season might actually be finished in terms of number of their games played. Sevco have still got 2 games in hand and are 5 points behind, so they could be overtaken by Sevco, but Spartans have officially won that league, the Lowland League, I believe. Circle back to the men's. Oh, here we go. Sorry, Big Reg just comment there before I move on. Glasgow City play Sevcourt on Wednesday, so that could work in our favour potentially as well. It has to work in our favour in the sense that somebody's going to drop points or both teams are going to drop points. So as long as we can beat Hearts, who we're playing on Wednesday, who are fourth in the league, so it's not a given, then that should be good for the girls. And hopefully they've got something to show for it, whether that's a cup or a Champions League spot at the end of the season. So let's circle back to the men just to wrap up. Now we'll go around and I'll get all your comments on who you thought the man of the match was and why. But just before we do that, just want to mention one other piece of good news that came from the game, and that was a first team debut for Ben Summers, who came on and played the last 5 minutes. I think he really got one run at the Kelly defence and it looked okay, but you don't really get much in 5 minutes, not much chance to impress, but just that was a bit of good news. But apart from that, considering everything that went on in the game, Anthony, who was your man of the match?
The two players that I had down were O'Reilly and Iwata, but I think O'Reilly shades it with his 2 goals and a return to form. And I mentioned was Rocco Vata got quite a decent run from about 66 minutes, I think, as well. He played at a really good crossfoot O, and it was probably O's one chance to score. Felt a bit sorry for him, and I don't know why Jurgen Klinsmann's going to Ayrshire to watch a game of football, to be honest. I mean, of all the games to go and watch, I really don't know if that was the best one to go and watch. But yeah, no, sorry. To answer your question, Matt O'Reilly, deserving of man of the match.
Tommy?
Yeah, I'd agree with Anthony, actually. I was thinking of Wata and O'Reilly, but I just think, as I mentioned probably earlier, I think O'Reilly just has continued his upward trajectory yesterday. I think he's looking a lot more sharp, a lot more comfortable. I think the change of shape and sort of the interchangeability in the midfield really helped him yesterday. 2 great finishes, calm, composed, great ball out to Haksabanovic for the third, put a great ball across the box. Midway through the second half that O could have got on the end of, not far away from. And he also does a lot of work defensively for us, not just in general play, but also set pieces and stuff. So yeah, great to see O'Reilly continuing on his way, and he was my man of the match.
2 votes for O'Reilly. Who are you going for, Paul?
Well, before I get to that, I'm going to apologise to Michael's cat for the dead cat bounce comments more than once. So apologies to Michael's cat. No harm intended. I had a couple of cats growing up, so nothing against the cat. It's a toss. It's exactly the same toss up between those 2 players. I've been back and forth on this all day, actually. And these 2 have nearly swayed me, but I am going to go for Iwata. Purely, well, look, I thought he was great throughout. If he scores that goal, he's an absolute shoe-in for me. But I think, given the fact he actually stayed on for the 90 minutes and O'Reilly got an early bath and put his feet up for a bit, I'm gonna
give harsh way to describe it.
Well, he got a little rest, didn't he? So look, O'Reilly was tremendous. He really was, and I think we've seen a bit of that for longer than maybe just the last 2 games, albeit that, he's maybe not had the credit for that, and he's maybe not been getting the absolute end result. But I think his general performance has been on an upward trajectory for quite a few weeks. In the last 2 or 3 matches, it's really picked up and obviously culminated in a couple of goals yesterday. So I wouldn't argue the toss either way, but I'm going to give it to Iwata, I think. I thought he was excellent.
In the comments, we've got Michael, John Francis, agrees with you. Iwata. We had, there was another one. Peter McGowan saying Iwata, man in the match as well. Edward Wyavoz saying Kobayashi, Matt O'Reilly, Iwata. He's picked 3 men in the match, but I think he's going with Iwata as the front runner there. I think if Kyogo scores that penalty, and that's his 50th goal for Celtic and his 30th goal of the season, I think he gets the kind of Ryan Giggs sentimentality bump up to man in the match, even though a penalty is a penalty. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think he gets that up.
It's not a penalty for us all the time, though. It's apparently pretty difficult.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes...
No, I do. I'm being facetious, but yeah, we're really strong. We really need to get somebody to be an absolute nailed-on starter and that can hit a penalty.
That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I think if Kyogo scores that penalty, he gets man of the match, even if he goes off at halftime. I think Greg Taylor had a great game. And obviously O'Reilly, and working my way up to who I think was man of the match, and that was my vote was for Iwata. So we've got a split room here, and I don't disagree with the shout for O'Reilly. I thought he was great. I just tend to not. I tend to give less of a bump for goals compared to most other people, and I thought Iwata was just controlled the game, particularly in the first half. So yeah, we've got a split decision. Iwata and O'Reilly can share the man of the match from the weekend review this Monday. Before we sign off, any last comments, guys? Anthony?
Season finales of The Mandalorian and Star Trek Picard, so all my science fiction's all ending on the 1 week. So, but yeah, that's been a good run. So yeah, I'm enjoying that, and hopefully shake this cold, and yeah, feeling better.
Yeah, hope you feel better soon, man. Tommy?
Not for me. Good to be playing ahead of Sevco this weekend. Hopefully we can play well. Hopefully Hatate gets back and at least makes the bench to make selection even more difficult for the following week. But let's get the win on Saturday and let's see how they respond to actually having to play after us for a change.
Yeah, let's keep racking up these records. We had 12 wins in a row now after going to Ibrox with 12 wins in a row in the league. So let's beat that in-season records and go for 13. Paul?
Well, Anthony's talking about telly. I just managed to sneak in the 4th episode of Succession before we came on air. If anyone's not on Succession already, get involved. This is the final season, and it's been a belter already. So yeah, looking forward to the next few weeks of that.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I'm just catching up on The Mandalorian myself, but I'm also trying to finish watching Ozark, but it's a bit longer final season. But it's another good one. Apart from that, just bring up a couple of final comments from Mahesh. McInnes, man of the match for me, turning a tricky game into a cakewalk. Michael Ross agrees. McInnes' moan of the match. So, Derek McInnes signing us off, and hopefully we get a win at the weekend. Can everyone please like the show as well as subscribing to the channel if you haven't already? Those likes do make a difference to our visibility on YouTube. Can you please follow us on social media if you do not already? Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. All the handles are at the top of the page there. Apart from that, thanks for listening. Thanks for getting involved in the comments, and we'll see you all next week, and enjoy the Tuesday and Wednesday shows. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.